But do you have to check your work 50 times? If you make a typo, does that throw you into like a state of like, beating yourself up? If you make an error, do you see that as a flaw of your psychic, your own psyche? So let's just kind of put everything into balance, with no such thing there, but
Yes.
knowing that at what expense if you're working so hard, don't you want joy along the way? And then I keep saying as I get older, do you want to say on your tombstone, she died trying to be perfect?
No.
What? No, she died with joy. She danced her way into the grave joyful and happy and a little bit messy. But it's just this idea of we're working so hard, and there will be costs along the way, like with the spinning the plates. There will be areas that will be neglected for a little bit, but it's not at any cost. It's not at the expense of your happiness and your joy. And I just feel we're all working so hard in different areas of our life that I think one area I would encourage people to work hard at is doing the inner work, exploring those conversations that you might be having with yourself that don't serve you, that you find yourself beating yourself up more than anyone else. You're not treating yourself as you would a loved one. And then at the end of the day, a really great thing is, would you speak to anybody else the way you speak to yourself?
Oh,
probably not.
Yeah. That is so true. And I love that you boil it all back down to the self, because that is the only thing we can change, we can manage, is ourselves.
And no one teaches us this. I think especially for women, this idea of taking care of ourselves feels very selfish.
Absolutely.
But it's not, there's that balance between selfish and then selfless. I see it's rare. I see very few selfish women. I see much more in the other spectrum where they're selfless to the expense of their own happiness. And that's not teaching your kids to put everybody else ahead of you. So it's that balance. So spinning the plates again, right? It's like taking care of my kids, taking care of my husband or my partner or my girlfriend, whatever it is. And then it's taking care of you. But no one taught me how to do that. My mom, bless her heart, she was an incredible mom, but she was so busy trying to keep a roof over her head because my dad was a drinker. So my mom had to take care of us by working 3 jobs. She didn't have the bandwidth to say, hey, Petra and Jenny, don't forget to love yourself along the way. She was spinning the plate just so we didn't get kicked out of a house, So this is the work that we do as we get older, and we go, hey, I want to do things differently, not better or worse, but maybe there's a different way of being in this world, that when we show up that way, guess what? It gives other women that we love, we want to help, we want to serve, also gives them permission too, and that includes your daughters.
Yes. And I am so grateful that you just brought up that there were some challenges in your childhood, because I think it's easy for listeners or readers of your book or whatever to think, well, of course Petra's happy. She's had the perfect life and she's this fitness star and she's been in like videos and DVDs and she's had this perfect life and she's beautiful and she's healthy. Of course it's easy for her to be fit, but you don't know me. My life was hard and my life was difficult, and we all have difficulties. We all go through really good times and really bad times. And it's still that choice that we can make to find our joy and do the inner work and ask ourselves the questions. And also that you just said, make some different choices, maybe do some things differently, not like, oh my gosh, this was horrible and I'm such a victim. Look at it for what it is.
Yeah, everyone has a story. Everyone's doing the best they can. And this is the danger, I think, Laura, in the world that we live in right now, is we see this overnight success online, on social, and even the Instagram thought leaders, the ones that have 5 million followers, that didn't happen overnight. That was a lot of hard work. That was seeing an opportunity before most of us did. Even the influencers are working really hard. But what social media doesn't do, it doesn't show the 10,000 hours. It rarely shows the struggles. And I also balance this out between, I don't ever want my life to be a therapy session on social media. I want to, inspire others without burdening them. But also, we all have highs, we all have lows. It's called life. That's just the way it is. And part of my challenges growing up was my dad drank, So my mom had to work, a lot to, keep a roof over our head. And because we were in England, in a very small town where it's all about keeping that stiff upper lip and fitting in and don't stand out too much. That's when my perfectionism took root, because I felt so flawed. Like, if anyone could look behind the scenes, oh my gosh, they're going to judge me. And no one would judge me, but I didn't know that as a kid. So I suddenly put on this persona of I'm perfect Petra, and I say the right thing at the right time, and I don't ruffle feathers. And then I'm going to have control, because everything else was so out of control. I have this false illusion. If I can control every other area of my life, then everything's going to be okay. And we know how well that works out, because the only constant is change. But I think this is where, one thing technology is doing, it's killing empathy. They're showing that screen time, children at the age of 8 now don't know how to show empathy, because empathy means being able to be in someone else's shoes. How can you do that if you're behind a screen? So what I think it would serve us all to remember, I'm just doing this as a reminder to myself too, when we're on social media looking at everyone else's highlight reel, they have a story. Nothing is as good as it seems. There's always a struggle. So we can go on and be compassionate for everybody else, including their successes. Then I just think that's what the world needs right now. And then have empathy for ourselves too. We're doing the best we can in this thing called life that is really unpredictable. And, we're recording this right before Valentine's Day, which I think is just, for most of us, is a very challenging time, because even if you're in relationship, there's this thing that we're going to have this, and I always, one of my favorite sayings is, the real romance starts when the movie ends. When they get kissing, then that's when all the real stuff happens. So this idea of just having a love of life, having a love of appreciation for who we are, our imperfectly flawed selves, our imperfectly flawed relationships that teach us the best of ourselves. Because here's the thing about perfect. We can't learn imperfect.
Yeah.
We learn in the struggles. We learn in the cracks. We learn in the so-called mistakes. We learn in the disasters, and then from that, we strengthen our resilience, our grit, our foundation. And then we build, the life, the next version, and life, the next version. And it's just this exciting thing that's unpredictable, can be overwhelming at times, so amazing at other times. That's just what it is.
Mm-hmm. Now, you have said some brilliant things about the highlight reel. And then you had said earlier that you realized you were posting all of this positive, wonderful stuff on social media for a while, and that was a disservice as well. And I was just thinking about that balance between the highlight reel, which we all have, and the low light reel, which we all have, and tying that into that 40% and that ability to choose. And wow, because you're right, I too like to post the good things, but I too like to connect and share with people. I have a story that's pretty painful too, but I'm still choosing to be positive. And I do want my kids to see my struggles, and I do want my friends and clients, but I also choose in my own head the positive, because it keeps my joy up. And wow, there's a lot of plates on that one too, isn't there?
Yeah, I think too, Laura, when I think there's times and places to share the struggle. And I always ask myself 3 questions. Will this, because we all have different parts of our stories too, right? So I had a story about my dad being alcoholic. I have a story about I had eating disorders. I had a story about someone betraying me and heartbreak. Does all those stories serve everybody? No. But if I meet someone, or a girlfriend's going through a hard time, like she just had a breakup, I get to relate that piece of my story. Like, my story's different to yours, but I do understand what it feels like to have your heart broken, And so I ask, will this help somebody? If it's going to help them feel less alone, I'll probably share it. Then, though, there are people that are so empathetic, they take your story on as their story. Yes. They're like, okay, then I won't share it. And then the other thing is, and I see this on social media unwittingly, is that, are we looking for anything in exchange for our story? So if I'm going to post something about my struggle, I got to make sure, in a way, I feel, this is my own personal choice, that I'm already through to the other side. I don't want to be still working it out on social media, especially if I'm a leader. I'm a leader in what I do, but I can say, this is what's helped me in the past. This is what I went through, but I want to make sure I'm not looking for sympathy. I want to make sure I'm not looking for people to point fingers at somebody else and make someone else the villain, because this is all about me at the end of the day. What did I learn from this experience? But there is a lot of comfort that can come from someone seeing you, Laura, whatever your journey and your story is, that, wow, Laura got through that. She got through that and she's this joyful. What that does, it's giving them hope. And there is nothing greater than having hope when you don't know where to take your next step or even your next breath. When your heart is shaken, broken to the core for whatever that reason is, the death of a loved one, loss of a loved one, loss of a dream, whatever that might be, loss of your health. If you can relate to someone who's maybe a year out from you, 2 years out from you, and they got through it, hope is the greatest gift we can give anybody.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yes, it is. Now, in your keynote, I know you talk about the shift from being a perfectionist to a passionist. And I was thinking that's kind of part of it too. It's sharing with people my life isn't perfect, but I still have passion and drive and hope and joy. And here are the gifts that have come from my imperfectness, from my heartbreak, from my devastation.
Yeah, and I think this kind of dovetails, Laura, to this idea of before, like people going, well, if I give up perfection, does that mean I'm suddenly not going to be successful? I'm like, oh my gosh, no, you are probably going to be more successful. Because the women I've met especially, oftentimes that glass ceiling is perfectionism. They think they're giving it all, but here's the thing. When you're trying to be perfect, you don't ask for help. You don't take the risks that you need because you're afraid of failing. You very rarely say, I don't know the answer. So we kind of keep ourselves limited, where if we come from a place of passion, of curiosity, more than like, I've never worked harder in my life than I do now, Laura, but I make more mistakes now than ever because I'm stretching myself. I'm also asking for help more than I ever have, because as I wrote my first book, as I moved into keynote speaking, I didn't know any of this. So I got to say, I have no idea. And so you might work harder than ever, but it's no longer being fueled by fear of being found out as like, I don't belong at this table. It's no longer being afraid of making the mistakes. It's being fueled by curiosity, potential, joy. And then what would happen if I did this? What would happen versus, oh my gosh, if I did this and it didn't work out. So the journey might be the same. You might work harder. You might be more successful. It's rare that you're going to be less successful, but you get to look back, and it's all about, and it's, we hear this is so overused, but life is not about the journey. It's about the destination. No, life's not about the destination, about the journey.
Yes.
It's about who you become through the failures, through the, the heartbreaks, through the successes. It's who as we unpeel all these layers of who we were brought up to think that we should be, as we get back to the root of who we always were, we just forgot that was enough, that our authentic self was pretty perfect. And so we started layering on these false beliefs about who we should be. So yeah, it's just this really imperfect, messy journey that when we can appreciate all of it and not just seek out those highs, the good moments, that's when we get to really savor the good moments, because we're not afraid of them passing. We're not holding our breath, waiting for the shoe to drop. So it doesn't necessarily change what's going to happen, but it changes our experience of everything that we're going through, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It does. And also when you were talking about working harder and putting yourself out there more, it reminded me of some experiences that I've had. And I'm willing to bet that you can relate to some of these experiences. I have made some big mistakes on stage in front of people. This one mistake involved tap shoes and falling down in tap shoes on stage in front of a lot of people, pretty much wearing a bikini. And it was a lot embarrassing. but it kind of endeared the people to me, because no longer was I a figure up on stage being